All right, and to wrap up this short talk session, we have Jason. Jason, it's you can go.
Thank you very much. So my name is Jason Morris. I'm the Rules as Code Director inside of Benefits Delivery Modernization inside Service Canada, and I'm talking about a little bit of work that I've done on the prevalence of expression types in legislative text. Really quickly, what is Rules as Code? It's in the tradition of the British Citizenship Act or British Nationality Act as a logic program. I forget the name now, but it's the application of knowledge representation and reasoning to statutes, and in particular to improve policy development, legislative drafting, and automation. In my specific case, more focused on the automation. So we are assuming that it will be easier for us to encode laws in a knowledge representation language if that knowledge representation language has features that are analogous to the features of language that are used inside the statutes. So the question then becomes, what features are used inside the statutes? How often do they appear, and how important are they for coding efficiency? And so
Jason, I'm sorry to interrupt. We
That's
are
right.
seeing the window with the thumbnails, and it's not moving.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me see if I can fix that for you.
Yeah, someone is hinting that you may be sharing the incorrect screen. Someone thinks you might be sharing the wrong screen.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Let me see. Switch back. Is that visible now?
Yes, that is what we were intended to see. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much for the interruption. So, as I was saying, we're trying to figure out what are the features of the language used in statutes, and how common do those features appear, and how important are each of them for efficiencies of doing knowledge representations. Our approach here is very simple. We just chose an act, we chose a list of expression types, and then we attempted to determine how frequently those expression types occur in the act to get some sort of rough indication of how important those might be as features for a knowledge representation language. The act that we selected was the Old Age Security Act because it's currently being automated inside my department. This is the list of expression types, which for time I won't try to justify, but if you have any questions, I'll be around later. And then the methods that we used included manual annotation for some of them. Most of them, we used a combination of regular expressions and Boolean logic to see whether or not an example of something occurred inside a line of statutory text. And then we also did a little preliminary experiment to see if we could use GPT-3 to detect some of the things that we had originally done with manual annotation. And we found that that was actually pretty promising. We got 90% or better on detecting 4 different categories at the same time based on 20 examples. So that's something we'll probably investigate more in the future. Our preliminary results are here in this table. Again, there's a lot there, so I won't try and go through it all, but some things that seemed particularly interesting to me. Cross-references happened a lot more than I would have guessed. And if in the code, I want to be able to say, I want to be able to refer to a section of legislation the way that the legislation does, then that's going to require that my code and the law have a structural isomorphism between them, where one section of one refers to the section of the other in a one-to-one relationship. So that's a feature that I think is going to be important for knowledge representation in law. The other thing that struck me as surprising was how overwhelmingly common time periods were. This may be just a feature of the particular act that we were looking at, but if I'm looking for a language to encode this act, I need that language to be able to deal with dates and times and durations, sequential time periods, things like fiscal quarters versus calendar quarters. All of that is stuff that would make my life easier as a knowledge engineer here. And then as a kind of counterexample, defeasibility didn't actually show up that often. There weren't that many explicit exceptions to defaults in this particular act. But even so, if you didn't have that structural isomorphism, and not having defeasibility in the language forces you to reformulate things. So it breaks that structural isomorphism. So I think that you would need to be able to support defeasibility in order to be able to support cross-references, because it all depends on whether you have that one-to-one relation between pieces of law and pieces of code. That's what I can share in just a few minutes, and I'm happy to take your questions.
Thank you, Jason. We have one question in the room.
Hi, my name is Jeffrey Billick. I'm a graduate student. I just have a quick question about how you developed your code book, or the different sorts of categories you used to label pieces of legal text.
Sure. So it wasn't a very disciplined way of determining what the categories would be. Basically, it was a combination of something that I knew frequently showed up in legislation, something that I knew support varied between tools for. So I know that some tools have defeasibility, others don't. So it was interesting to be able to compare that. And then unfortunately, a major consideration was whether there was a way to get at it with regular expressions, because regular expressions is basically the only technique that was used to automatically discover some of these expression types. So that was a major consideration. There are things that I would like to count, like how often do the defeasibility statements refer to a scope of legislation? For example, like part 1, or for the purposes of this section, or something like that. We don't have anything like that yet, but that would be useful as well.
Okay, we have another question in the room.
Hi, thank you so much for the talk. I was wondering how your department went about testing these tools before releasing them to the public.
Do you mean the tool that I use to do the analysis, or do you mean the tools that the department is generating otherwise?
I think both sides, whatever you'd like to talk about.
So technically, the tools that I'm using haven't been released to the public. I would like to do that at some point when I'm less embarrassed about my coding. But because of the prototypical nature of it, I'm not sure. And because what we're trying to generate is a rough estimate of the occurrence of things, I'm not sure that there's a standard against which we could test that, apart from just having someone do manual annotation and then see how it compares. If we were going to use something like GPT-3, then we would compare the results of that to manual annotations and do leave one out testing. For the purpose of the products that we are actually developing based on the encodings of the law, honestly, that's kind of outside of my scope. I know that there's a significant amount of testing that goes into that, and in particular, user testing is a very significant part of what we do in our department. But I'm sorry, it's a bit outside of my field of expertise, so I don't really know.